Good morning. We're all still reeling from Tuesday's horrific shooting in a school and the murder of 19 young children and the two teachers. And yesterday I spoke about gun violence and about young people being able to purchase a gun and machine guns and the fact that there is no background checks, or not enough in all states. In our state there is. And I got a lot of pushback back and forth, a lot of comments on my post besides my Dvar Torah. And I stand by what I said, and I'm happy to say that which is not popular. And of course I mentioned also that we need to remember the issue of mental health. We need to remember the issue of glorifying gun violence in Hollywood movies. We need to speak about all these underlying things besides gun control. They're all important. But I want to speak about something else today. Something that might not be as popular, but is really an underlying current and something worrying about our society and how we live in America. They say this old anecdote about this Jewish atheist who lived in Manhattan, and he sent this kid to the preppiest private school that happened to be a Catholic school. That's what was available. He wanted the best education. And one day the kid comes home and says, "Daddy, I learned about the Trinity, Mother, and the father looks at him and turns white, and he grabs the kid by the collar, and he says, "Listen, kiddo, there's one God, and we don't believe in him." It's a funny joke, but it's a sad joke. We live in a society where faith and godliness is ridiculed and frowned upon. We live in a society where we're so worried about separation of state and church that we've eradicated God and purpose and meaning from our public schools, from our society, from our children. You can have all the gun control laws and the best mental health and the best and take out all violence of guns in Hollywood. But if we don't give our children and our society a purpose of why you live, what you get up for every single day, and what's important in instilling in our society, then there is no hope of eradicating this violence and this madness we live in. We're so worried about separation of state and church that a kid could go through 8 years of school in public school and never know that there's a God, never know that there's a purpose and a meaning to why we live. Why do you get up every morning? What do you want to accomplish? What are your goals? Is it all about acquiring wealth and affluence and business success and sports? Or is there something deeper that you live for? I remember as a young child sitting at the Rebbe's Farbrengens, and this is back in the 80s, and the Rebbe pleaded and cried, something that's not so popular in Massachusetts, that we need to institute a moment of silence in our schools, that the children could come in the morning and stop and pause and think, why am I here? What am I studying? What is the purpose of my being? Judaism has always been a religion that has instilled within us the sense of purpose, of living with a mission, being driven to something beyond you, of deep faith in changing this world and making the world a better place. In the service in Aleinu we say every day, "L'sakein oilam b'malchus shin daled yud." We want to better this world, perfect this world with the name of God, with the influence of faith, of deep connection and commitment. This week's Torah portion we read in if you follow in my laws, and the word that the Torah uses for laws is chukah. The word chukah means a law that we don't understand, but it also means engraved. And the rabbis say there's a reason why the Torah uses the word chukim, because there's two types of ways you can write on a paper. Even a Sefer Torah, when you write on the Torah, you have ink on a parchment. The ink is separate from the parchment. But when you engrave on a stone, if it's a tombstone or any stone you have, the letters and the stone become one. They're inseparable. That's the identity of the stone and the letters, they're one. The Torah tells us that in order to have the blessing of a society, of godliness, of morality, of caring, you need to be engraved with faith. You need to be engraved with a purpose of why I live. Not once a year on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur where you go to shul, but every day when you get up and every moment that you breathe and live, you understand that there's a purpose to why you live. And that's what we're missing in society today. Not only don't we have the moment of silence, not only don't we have faith and purpose in society in America, but you look around, especially in the elite and the intellectuals and the academics, they frown upon faith. They frown upon the purpose of a person who has spirituality and meaning and faith in God. And we have to stand up the same way we have to stand up to the gun violence, and the same way we have to stand up to gun laws that protect our citizens, and the same way we need mental health and focusing on people's mental health being better, and the same way we need to focus on violence in Hollywood. We need to have the courage to speak up and say we need a moment of silence, we need a purpose. And I remember, like today, the Rebbe crying and begging and pleading and saying that our public schools will be a place like a jungle if we don't give the kids faith and a moment of silence, at least to be able to know that they have purpose in life. You know, I've told you this before. In the olden days I grew up, I remember in the olden days, not so old, but when I grew up there was these fire engines. I think they're not around anymore. You had a fireman in the front driving and one in the back. There were two drivers, one in the front and one in the back. And I think about it a lot because most people, when they drive their life, it's all connected to their past. There's a driver in the back. They're influenced by where they came from, where they were brought up, who they are. But there's no driver in the front. In Judaism, as much as we're influenced by where we came from, we're influenced by where we're going. We're living with a purpose. Jews for eternity have lived with the purpose of bringing about a messianic era, a time when the wolf will lie with the lamb, when there'll be peace. We look forward to a time when we can instill the world with faith and love towards each other, towards humanity, but more importantly towards God too. Not being embarrassed to have faith in God, not being embarrassed to be who we are, but having the courage to say, I have faith, I believe in God, I live with a purpose. That's what I want to instill in my children, even if it's not popular, and even if my friends will laugh at me and say I'm naive and I'm primitive and I'm small-minded and I'm backwards and I'm living in the archaic age. No, this is who I am. Purpose, meaning, faith is important to me. And when we instill this in our children, society is different. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood. We dealt with a lot of issues, like every other place. But we didn't have gun violence. And not because guns weren't available. But faith and purpose instilled in us a moral compass of who we are. They say this story about this child who was very faithful, and his parents, they didn't really believe in God, and they kept on ridiculing their kids. So one time, finally, they put this note under his bed that said, God is nowhere. Someone put it there. And the kid gets under the bed, he sees under his pillow, he takes out the paper and he comes running down. This bed, he says, look, he tells the parents, God is now here. It says God is now here. Those same words that could have been God is nowhere. He saw it as God is now here. We as a society, and we as a people, and we as a community have to instill in our children that God is now here, that there's a purpose for why we live, there's a meaning for who we are, and to have the courage and the strength to implement that, to live and drive on a fire engine that has a driver in the back, but also a driver in the front. Yes, we are people of who we come from, and we're influenced by thousands of years of tradition and faith, but we also have a purpose, who we want to be and what we want to accomplish. God bless you, and may we eradicate all evil, and may we be able to live in a society that doesn't need security in front of their shows, in front of their schools, because the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, and the wolf will lie with the lamb, and will live in peace and tranquility and nurturing of each other. God bless you.